Right, I do want to talk about, or actually I don't, but we need to talk about the coronavirus. Unfortunately, we're taking a look into the winter, what could happen. And what seems to be popping up around the world is that there are these offshoots now of the Omicron variant. So it's changing pretty quickly, and it's different than how it did it before.
That's right. As we've been traveling and as all of these mask mandates and social distancing measures are becoming more and more lax, we're seeing more people traveling and bringing other viruses back into our country, or we're seeing these viruses mutate in areas that are still having less amounts of vaccine immunizations being given. So it's extremely important to remember that we're still in a pandemic. The variants are still arising throughout the world, and we do need to take the proper precautions to protect ourselves, especially if we're in high risk categories, especially as we're entering into the winter months where there's tons of new viruses, not just COVID, that are circulating in our population. So it's another reason why we should keep talking about making sure that you've gotten your primary series of vaccinations for COVID, especially making sure that you've gotten the booster. The booster has the new variants that are covered in that opportunity. So it's extremely important to think about that too.
And the other thing too is if you do test positive, there is Paxlovid that's out there. But for people that have a history of cardiovascular disease, there is, you need to talk about, drug interactions with this.
Yes. So Paxlovid has a combination of two different medications. And what one of the medications does, ritonavir, is it actually inhibits one of the important proteins that helps to metabolize medications. And so there are certain types of medications, especially in the cardiovascular category, as well as in many other categories of drugs, that are actually, the metabolism is inhibited by Paxlovid. So what that means is that the amount of that medication is actually extremely high in some of the patients, which is why doctors need to know exactly what medications you're taking before they prescribe you Paxlovid, to make sure there's no drug-to-drug interactions, and to ensure that your normal medications don't need to be adjusted in terms of the dosages or even stopped when taking Paxlovid. It was interesting, this paper that you shared this morning, which basically was talking about how certain medications like statin therapy, which is so common, right, in our population for people taking who have cardiovascular history or have high cholesterol, taking those statins can actually need an adjustment in their dosing before going on Paxlovid. So important that we bring that point up, as many of our viewers, I'm sure, are taking these medications.
Absolutely. When we take a look at, the technological advances that are on the horizon, we've been talking about this on this show for a little bit, since they came out with the idea of these nasal vaccines. So now there's 95, different nasal vaccines around the world, but 6 of them are now in the phase 3 of those clinical trials, which really offers some hope for, the mucosal vaccine and maybe stopping it where it's entering.
That's right. So we're talking about these nasal vaccines that are basically given through the nose, usually as a nasal pump. And what they do is they basically are working on that primary barrier that involves the virus coming into our body through our nasal passages, as an example. And what we've seen is that with other nasal vaccines, there's a boost in this IgA response, which is another type of antibody that helps us to protect our bodies against certain types of viruses. So I think the nasal vaccine is extremely important, can help a lot of people, especially those that are needle phobic.